Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Pittsburgh Sports Memories podcast. My name is Tim Hannon, and my co host is here. His name is.
Hold on. What's my name? Name. Oh, Steve Word. Yeah, that's it. I
You
got it.
got it.
I got it. Took me
That's
a
why
minute.
that's why we always have to rehearse these episodes ahead of time. This week we're going to talk about the surprising history of the Steelers and the 49ers. So we're recording this in 2023. The Steelers are going to open the 2023 season here very soon against the San Francisco 49ers. And I thought it'd be a good time to look back at the history of this series because, San Francisco, a franchise that the Steelers don't play very often. They're in the NFC. Um, so you don't think of a lot of history between these two teams, but there actually is some pretty interesting history there. So I wanted to cover some of that. Before we get into that, just some fun facts about this series. San Francisco leads the all-time series 12-10. Both franchises obviously have had a ton of success over the years. Pittsburgh has 6 Super Bowls and 8 conference championships. The Niners have 5 Super Bowls and 7 conference championships. And both of these teams lead their respective conferences in championship game appearances. San Francisco has 18 and Pittsburgh has 16. And one last fun fact, despite playing in a combined 15 Super Bowls, Steve, these two teams have never faced each other in a Super Bowl, although they did come close a few times. In 1984, 94, and 97, both of them were in the AFC and NFC championship game, but one or both of them lost. So those are just some fun facts about the Steelers 49ers. But let's get into the fun history. And we'll go chronologically and we'll go all the way back to 1954. And we'll start with a guy that I think we've talked about on the show before, Steve, Walt Kiesling. Have we talked about Walt Kiesling before?
Guy that cut Johnny Unitas.
Oh, maybe that's why we've talked about him. Okay. Now it's ringing a bell.
But the Chiefs still stuck with him.
Yes, he did. He in 1954 he is the new head coach of the Steelers, and I put the word new in air quotes because Kiesling had 2 other stints as Steelers head coach before that, and he'd also been a longtime player and assistant. And kind of to what Steve was alluding to earlier, that's just kind of the way Art Rooney ran the shop. Just kind of hired whoever was milling about in the team parking lot. Uh, but hey, they always say third time is the charm, right? And actually, in 1954, Walt Kiesling starts out on a roll. The Steelers win 4 out of their first 5 games. And remember, that's back when there's only a 12-game season. So winning 4 out of your first 5 makes them a first place team pretty much halfway through the season. They had also beaten, or actually crushed the eventual world champion Cleveland Browns 55-27. And still feels really weird to say world champion Cleveland Browns, but that was life in 1954.
With Otto Graham and Jim Brown, too, probably.
Yeah, yes. So yeah. Again, 4-1, pretty deep into a 12-game season. But as things usually did in those days, the bottom kind of drops out. The Steelers lose 3 in a row, but now they get San Francisco at home. And the Niners actually had a really good team that year. Their quarterback was Hall of Famer Y.A. Tittle, but they were super injured, and they had lost 3 straight games because everybody was hurt. So there was a lot of expectation by fans that this would be the get right game for the Steelers, right? The San Francisco, they're traveling all the way across the country. They're banged up. This is the game where the Steelers win. They get back into the race, but it doesn't go well. Here's an excerpt from the Pittsburgh Press the day after the game. And I'm just going to read this. It was billed as a football game, but it more closely resembled a game of Scrabble between a couple of tired old maids at Forbes Field last night. The 35,000 yawning and booing fans who started leaving early in the fourth quarter saw the inept Steelers drop their 4th straight game 31-3 to a 3 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 So that's pretty harsh.
Yeah.
The other Pittsburgh newspaper, the Post Gazette, called it a wake. The 49ers come in, they kill the Steelers, even though they don't have anybody, and the fans are super angry and never really trust Walt Kiesling again after that, probably cutting Johnny Unitas the next season didn't help his cause, as Steve mentioned. The Steelers finished the season way out of the race for the Eastern Division. So let's fast forward to November 27th, 1978. The Steelers are in San Francisco to play the 49ers on Monday Night Football, which at that time was a big deal, right? Monday
Dun,
Night
dun,
Football was
dun,
the game of the week.
dun, dun,
Yep.
dun, dun.
But unfortunately, some very tragic events unfold in San Francisco earlier that afternoon. One person, Steve, I know for sure we have not talked about on this podcast is a woman named Dianne Feinstein. Do you know who Dianne Feinstein is?
Still serving member of Congress, I do believe.
Yes, at age 146. Very impressive.
She voted for Lincoln.
Well, back in 1978, she is the president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and she's tasked with having to make this very unfortunate announcement to the press.
President of the Board of Supervisors, it's my duty to make this announcement. Both Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk have been shot and killed. Jesus Christ!
So
way to be professional, press corps.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was pretty shocking. And the mayor of San Francisco, George Moscone, and city supervisor Harvey Milk, both assassinated by their coworker, city supervisor Dan Brown. There's a whole
at least
story
in the
behind
Twinkie
that.
Defense.
The Twinkie defense, absolutely, yes.
It's like the Chewbacca defense. It's undefensible. You can't.
Yeah, I knew you would know that story, Steve, because you're the history buff. I think they made a movie about that with, I want to say, Sean Penn at one point.
That was about Harvey Milk.
Oh, that wasn't about the assassination. It was about.
Yeah, it was about
okay.
It. And he was not killed because of any sexual preference he had. He was killed because the guy was ticked off that he lost his job.
Right. It was a whole.
They tried to make it like, oh, it's like a whole like persecution of that, but it wasn't. It was just the guy was just ticked off that he lost his job and he killed him.
Yeah. So, like I said, whole interesting.
Now, maybe
story
it played
behind
a factor in it. I don't know, but I always thought it was more just workplace violence.
Yeah, whole interesting story behind that, and then the subsequent trial and conviction that a lot of people thought was way too soft because of the Twinkie
yeah
defense.
It's like, he said he ate too many Twinkies, and
and he was like insane because of it. So obviously the murder of two city officials is a pretty dark day for the city of San Francisco, and the question arises, hey, should we really be playing this game at Candlestick Park tonight? Candlestick was publicly owned and operated by the city, specifically by the San Francisco Parks and Recreation Commission. And they sent a telegram to the NFL and to Art Rooney and to Niners owner Eddie DeBartolo Jr. I did not know people still sent telegrams in 1978, but apparently they did. And
just coming over the wire, Mr. Rooney.
and what the Parks and Rec Commission said is, it is our strong belief.
That sounded hilarious.
It is our strong belief that the use of a city-owned facility this evening for a sporting event is inappropriate, would be in poor taste. So they're asking the league to cancel the game. There's also concern that, because this was a politically charged kind of assassination, that there could be protests or riots, and would it really be a good idea to divert a bunch of city resources to a football game? But the NFL says, you know what? We played when Kennedy was shot. We're not going to cancel for your mayor. So
NFL's a bunch of jerks. No.
Yeah, we're playing the game. Stop.
Yeah.
Too bad. Stop. May he rest in peace. Stop. So yeah, that's
a moment of silence before the game.
Well, funny that you say that, because before the game, they actually do hold a moment of silence at Candlestick Park. It's very awkward because it's like dead quiet in the stadium, but then there's like a handful of people just yelling out swear words and stuff during this moment of silence, and you can very audibly hear them during the broadcast. I can't play it because we're a PG podcast, and there's a lot of non-PG words that people are screaming out. What I can play for you.
Was there a lot of people at the game? I thought it was pretty empty because I think we've seen highlights of this, right? I've seen.
I don't know how many people were there, but there was enough people to
scream swear words.
Right.
A moment of silence.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
So I can't play that, but what I can play for you is the reaction of Steelers broadcasters Myron Cope and Jack Fleming to that. Take a listen.
Moment of silence observed in memory of the late mayor of San Francisco, George Boscone, and the city supervisor, Harvey Milk.
How do you like the cuckoos in the crowd? They're observing a moment of silence, and there are, I don't know, a handful of voices out there at the top of their lungs shouting obscenities and whatnot during the moment of silence. But I guess there are proportionately more cuckoos in this town than elsewhere. Is that fair to say?
I wouldn't want to say that, but Myron, if you didn't have them, you'd think the human race was suddenly becoming just too perfect.
Well,
just unbelievable.
That's terrible.
Oh, it's terrible. It's absolutely unbelievable, but here it is, particularly in San Francisco. You get that kind of reaction. Paul Holfer is going deep for the 49ers.
Wow. And to the game. Wow. I mean, gotta love Myron calling it how it is. I mean, that's ridiculous. Like I don't even understand. Weren't both those guys popular? They were popularly elected. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they weren't popular back in the 70s. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's just odd that why would you do that? That's
I don't even know that it was like people were upset because of the moment of silence was for those two guys, or it was just it's quiet, and so if I yell out something, then everybody will hear it, right? Just somebody being a jerk. I feel like that rant from Myron Cope would cause more controversy today with him just kind of.
I'm sorry, they deserved it. What you're going to defend people yelling during a moment?
No, but then he kind of like labels the whole entire city of San Francisco as disrespectful nut jobs. I feel like that part would have garnered a little bit of controversy, but again,
stop yelling during the moment of silence. Hey,
Well, that whole thing
perfectly within your control. Yeah.
Right. No, I mean, for sure, criticize that. But then the kind of him and Fleming insinuating that, that's what you get in a place like San Francisco. I think that part would have rankled a few feathers. But nevertheless, as for the game itself, Terry Bradshaw throws 3 touchdown passes. Dak Ham has 2 interceptions, and the Steelers win pretty easily, 24-7. But pretty interesting.
I wonder if the fans had any swear words for that performance.
Probably. Maybe some more appropriate time to swear after that. Let's go to 1984. In 1984, 49ers are in the middle of their dynasty.
Sounds like an ominous year.
Yeah. I've heard there's a book written about that somewhere. Yeah. 1984 is arguably the 49ers' best team ever. They're really kind of revolutionizing football with Bill Walsh and his West Coast offense. They have a quarterback who's pretty good. His name is Joe Montana. He's from around these parts. Nobody can figure out how to stop him. The Steelers, meanwhile, are a team in transition. Pretty much all the guys from the 70s, they're gone by this point, replaced with the likes of Mark Malone and Frank Pollard and Louis Lips, names like that. When they meet at Candlestick Park in Week 7, the 49ers are undefeated. The Steelers are 3-3.
Sounds like a fair matchup.
So it's Joe Montana versus Mark Malone. Yeah, it does not feel like much of a fair matchup, right?
And who's like the big defensive player for the Steelers? Like, I
don't know. Good question.
Merriweather, I don't know.
Yeah, Mike Merriweather, David Little.
David Little.
Yeah,
David Little versus Roger Craig. There's a matchup for the ages.
There you go. Well, the Steelers actually do come out and surprise everyone. They jump out to an early 10-0 lead. And you mentioned
David Little.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the defense. That they did a really good job shutting down the high-powered San Francisco offense for most of the game. The defensive coordinator for the Steelers is a guy named Tony Dungy, And he really calls
he'll never do anything. He'll never go anywhere.
Yeah, he really calls a masterful game. I mean, somebody should really give that guy a head coaching job at some point.
Let's wait 20 years to do that.
Yeah, for sure, because the NFL is very smart.
Yeah.
So the defense really shows up, but as we mentioned before, that the Steelers' offense isn't great. Lynn Swann and Terry Bradshaw aren't walking through that door, so they're not really getting any more points. And ultimately, the Niners.
Patino.
Yeah. Yep, that was my Patino reference.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the Niners mount a comeback. They take a 17-10 lead in the fourth quarter, but don't count out Mark Malone. He responds with a 15-play, 83-yard drive. Comes down to a 4th and goal from the 6-yard line. So remember, at this point, we're late in the fourth quarter. The Steelers are down by 7. Then the 4th and goal from the 6. So it's touchdown or bust. And here's what happens.
Going to go for the touchdown. 3:36 to play. Malone, lots of time. Malone now rolling, throwing over the middle. Oh, a great play by Eric Wright. Flag. They're going to call interference. Oh, they call interference. Very late flag. There's Stallworth. Wright comes on.
Well, I don't know about that call. I'm telling you.
All right. Was that Merlin Olsen? Yeah, it sounded like him. I don't know. Or it might have been the other one, the other offensive lineman from that time. But yeah, it's Eric Wright made a nice play. That probably shouldn't have been a penalty. And that's in San Francisco, right? Or is that here?
Yeah, that's at San Francisco.
I thought that's grass. Yeah. So, boy, where were the fans with the swear words then?
Yeah. It's, we've talked about this on the show before. I think there's to me, there's like 2 categories of bad calls. There's close calls and just outright terrible calls. I feel like that was a close call. Eric Wright was a Pro Bowl cornerback. He was really good. He's covering John Stallworth. He gets his arm in there. If you watch it on super slow motion, it looks like he makes a pretty good play. He gets his arm in front. Maybe he's grabbing onto the shoulder a little bit. It's ticky tack. They could have really let that go, but they don't. They call pass interference. The Steelers get a fresh set of downs, and they get the game-tying touchdown. And
the game's only tied, and the Steelers defend. It's not like they took the lead on that play.
That's what I was just about to note, Steve. I'm glad you said it. No, I'm glad you said it, because it does only tie the game. Tough call.
And you have Joe Montana and like the greatest offense ever. That's
that's right.
It's not like they'll ever be able to drive the field 98 yards with John Candy in attendance.
Yes, and all they need,
touchdown.
They don't even need 90 yards, Steve. All they need is a field goal. It's tied, like you said. So Joe Montana certainly can get you in field goal range with 3 minutes left, right? Let's see.
David Little.
Montana's got time, got a man. Coming back with it is Hinkle. Hinkle
or Craig Hinkle.
Sideline. Hinkle still going.
It was the other linebacker.
All the way down inside the 5-yard line.
That's right. Don't sleep on. Was it Craig Hinkle?
Brian Hinkle.
Yeah,
who was a pretty good linebacker on those 80s teams. He intercepts Montana, takes it inside the 5. Gary Anderson trots out, kicks an easy field goal, and the Steelers win. It's a huge upset, because it ends up being the only game San Francisco loses that entire season.
Wow, another 15-1 team.
Yep.
So in back-to-back years, the NFL had 2 15-1 teams.
Correct.
That's crazy.
Yep, and that's the only game they lost. To this day, there's still controversy over that pass interference call. The Niners think that cost them an undefeated season.
I would say Joe Montana throwing an interception cost you in the undefeated season, but that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before too, right? So there's bad calls, close calls. There's tough calls that don't go your way. But then there's a lot of instances in NFL history where you look back on a bad call or a close call and forget that the team still had ample opportunity to do something after that. Even the worst call that I've ever seen, the Jesse James call.
Yeah, we could have kicked the field goal after that.
We still had a chance to do something after that. The tuck roll is another good example. Okay, the Patriots still had the ball, but they still could have stopped them from driving and tying the game. Again,
Well, I
you
don't
just
know.
go down the
That
list.
was a heck of a kick by Adam, but that
But
50 yards in
they
the
weren't in
snow, that was insane. That
but
was
they weren't in
insane.
field goal range when the tuck roll play happened, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You play defense and and the tuck roll play. Yeah. So anyway, point this being that you can still and in this case, you had Joe Montana, he threw an interception. So again, conveniently forgotten. But here's Bill Walsh addressing it with his team the week after the game.
We say that officials can lose it for you. They did. But that's part of the game. They're inept idiots. But that is part of life, whether you're driving down the street or in the military or working somewhere or making love or whatever the hell it is. There are some things that happen out of your control, and you have to account for them and overcome them.
He actually said the exact same thing that we said.
Mm-hmm.
He really did. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure the officials don't appreciate being called inept idiots, but his point being, like, I think he was just tapping into the emotions of his team and just like basically say, well, that's fine. You can be upset about it all you want, but he's saying the same thing we're saying.
Right.
You had a chance. Don't throw an interception to Ryan Hinkle. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that was not a press conference. That was a private discussion with his team that somebody happened to film. So that's what he told his team privately.
That's probably why he didn't get fined for it.
Right. Right. One footnote. We mentioned the Steelers were 3-3 coming into that game. That win really gives them a bunch of momentum, and they make a surprise run that year all the way to the AFC Championship game where they bow out to Dan Marino and the Dolphins. So they were one game away from a rematch with the 49ers in Super Bowl 19. Imagine the storyline if that would have happened, Steve, if the Steelers would have found a way to win that game against Miami. So that the 49ers would have been in the Super Bowl against the only team they lost to that season. Do you think Mark Malone beats Joe Montana twice?
How does Harvey the Toast Clayton hold up against Jerry Rice twice? I mean,
Jerry Rice was still in college at the time. That's how.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Who was the receivers?
They had Dwight Clark. He was pretty good. Yeah. Again, it was their offense was Montana. I mean, as long as you had,
they still had Roger Craig. So,
right. Yeah. I mean, look at Brady. I mean, he had Randy Moss once. He had other decent receivers, but it didn't really matter as long as you had the all-world quarterback. Not Jerry Rice, obviously, super good too. So
David Patton is immortal.
All right, so let's fast forward 3 years. The Steelers are opening the 1987 season at home against guess who?
Dallas Cowboys.
Yes. How did you know that?
Yeah.
It's the 49ers. So it's Joe Montana versus Mark Malone, part 2, the revenge.
Well, Montana's not going to lose to Malone twice, right?
Never.
No.
So there's a lot of hand wringing in Pittsburgh prior to this game, Steve.
Well, there's one thing we're good at. It's wringing our hands.
Oh, yes. And dread and doom. But the reason for that might surprise you. It's because the Steelers had gone 0-4 in the preseason.
Who cares?
So in the defense of 1987 Pittsburgh fans, back then you did play your starters in preseason games way more than you do now. Right now, it's like they might get a series. Sometimes they sit for the entire game. Back then, the preseason games, you played a lot of starters for significant time. So it was kind of seen as this barometer for how the season was going to go. So people were really just dreading the season. This is going to be a terrible team. That the offense especially looks terrible in those preseason games. Can't do anything on offense. But in week 1 of the regular season here against San Francisco, the offense still looks really bad. Mark Malone in this game, Steve, 9.
Is this the Joe Walton offense, or are we still pre-Joe Walton?
We're still pre-Joe Walton. Okay. But Mark Malone in this game, 9 for 33 for 99 yards passing.
It's better than 8 for 33.
He's booed by the crowd at Three River Stadium, which isn't wasn't unusual in those days.
Who was their backup? Cliff Stout? I don't even know.
I believe it was Bubby Brister by that point.
The Bubster.
So, always the be careful what you wish for thing there. So the offense stinks. Good news, though, is that the defense comes to play. Once again, Tony Dungy, for whatever reason, has Bill Walsh's number. And his defense gets off to a big start with this play on 49ers running back Roger Craig.
Wasn't bad.
The thing that makes this happen is watch the hit by Mike Merriweather, number 57, right there. Shakes the ball loose, pops right in Delton Hall's hands. Nobody around him. Touchdown.
Hey, they don't have enough announcers with Southern accents in the game anymore.
Do you know who that was?
I don't know. Somebody from the South?
The Snake, Kenny Stabler.
Nice, Alabama. Yeah.
Yeah, I was kidding.
Yeah, they really I like it, like, even Peyton Manning kind of got rid of his Southern drawl. It's like they should just let people be people.
You're right, though. They used to have a lot more announcers that had an accent. You don't see that as much anymore. It's a good point.
Let me announce a game in full Yinzer. Hey, you got that.
You had like Lindsey Nelson. You had like Keith Jackson. Those guys all had those thicker accents. You're right. You don't see that anymore.
With the barn burner of a play, Delton Hall. Yeah.
So a fumble return for a touchdown. The defense also intercepts Montana 3 times. One of those was again from Delton Hall. That guy was playing in his first ever football game, and he was. If Steelers fans remember Delton Hall, they'll probably remember he was not good. He got burned a lot, but man, in that game, you thought he was the next Mel Blount.
I didn't think he was that terrible. Was he that bad? I don't know.
He wasn't good. I mean, he had if I remember correctly, he had a really good rookie season. Obviously, very good first game. Has an interception and a fumble return for a touchdown. But yeah, basically the defense. Montana, Jerry Rice is playing by this point. Montana and Rice still rack up a bunch of yards, but those turnovers really kill them, and the Steelers win 30-17. And once again, it's a game. Yeah, it's another shocking win because in 1987, the 49ers only lose 2 games in the regular season.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's one of them. So in 1984 and 1987, the 49ers lost 3 regular season games, and 2 of them were to Mark Malone.
Well, you can't stop Mark Malone. You can only hope to contain him. I mean, and their defense was pretty good. Like they had Ronnie Lott, and I don't know if Eric Wright was still playing in 1980. Was it 87?
Yeah.
But they definitely had Ronnie Lott.
Well, again, Malone was 9 for 33. I think honestly that was all turnovers. It was just you have a defensive touchdown, you had interceptions that put them in scoring range. So it was one of those,
when you can score 30 points on only completing 9 passes.
Yes.
That's probably your offense.
Yes.
That much.
For sure. One footnote to this game. Niners owner Eddie DeBartolo, who also owns the Penguins at the time, says this after the game, quote, "If I had to lose to anybody today, I'm glad I lost to Pittsburgh. I think the world of Art Rooney, Dan, and his family. I wish them the best. They went all out to make things comfortable for us today, except on the field." So that was
I like Eddie DeBartolo. You gotta like it, yeah.
Yeah, all class, right?
Yeah.
So,
but he wasn't. Well, that was his dad that built the malls. But,
yeah,
he was a good owner of the Penguins. He was a good owner of the Penguins.
He was. Yeah. So that was 1987. Let's go to 1990, and this script might sound familiar. 49ers are really, really good. In fact, at this point, they have just won the previous 2 Super Bowls. And this is another season where the Niners only lose 2 regular season games. Once again, they're playing the Steelers. This time it's Montana versus Bubby Brister. Tony Dungy's gone by this point, but once again, the defense is all over Montana. They intercept him twice in the first half. This is at San Francisco too. And Steve, here's a great trivia question. Tony Dungy's gone. You have to be a real diehard Steelers fan to know the answer to this.
Oh,
who's the Steelers defensive coordinator at this point?
What year is this? 89?
90.
90? Yikes. Oh, man. You got me on that one.
It's Dave Brazil.
Oh yeah, the immortal Dave Brazil.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like I said, you really have to be a diehard to
I get the
have
feeling
that
San
answer.
Francisco's gonna win this one.
Well, let's see what happens. Let's see how this plays out.
I honestly don't know who won this game. I know who wins it next. I think we play him again in like 95 or something, don't we?
So yeah. So
there's another year where Steve Young carves us up.
There is. So in the second half, the 49ers, they have a slim lead, but the Steelers are right in this game. They're primed to make a comeback, make it a trifecta of Joe Montana upsets. It's very similar to the 84 game. They're down in the second half, but the defense has kept it very close. All they have to do is put together a drive like they did in that 84 game. And then here's what happens.
Gopher's kick is short. Coming up to get it is Foster. That's a free ball. That's a free ball. And the 49ers get a touchdown. Rookie Barry Foster from Arkansas just let the ball go.
I haven't ever seen that before in 30 years of football. You always talk to people about it. You warn them about it.
Oh, wow. George Seifert was the coach then?
George Seifert was the coach. Bill Walsh was actually the guy announcing there. He was the one that said, in 30 years of football, I've never seen that.
Wow.
So what happened
totally
there?
Taking credit. Oh, I took total. I totally coached him up on that play. George didn't know anything about that. Yeah.
What happens there is the 49ers are kicking off, and Barry Foster for the Steelers is the return man, and it goes over his head, and he just lets it bounce at the 5-yard line. He treats it like a punt. It's like, oh, I can't catch it, so I'll just let it go and let the other team down it like you would a punt. But on a kickoff, of course, that's a live ball. And the 49ers pounce on it. They open up a 2-score lead. The Steelers aren't able to overcome that, and San Francisco ends up winning that game pretty handily. Everybody's really angry at Barry Foster after that game. Chuck Noll says, quote, "We screwed up good." And the prevailing narrative, looking back on that, it's one of those like all-time bloopers. And the narrative in Pittsburgh has always been that Noll never forgave Foster for that play and basically made him ride the bench for the next 2 seasons until Bill Cowher came in as head coach, and then Foster got to play and promptly set the team single season rushing record. But the way Foster tells it, he was a rookie, he was still learning, and he says Noll was actually very supportive. Foster says that when the other coaches would yell at him, Chuck Noll would say, "Back off." And Foster said, quote, "I always respected that about him. He just kind of made me feel a little bit better that even though I was making mistakes, he supported me." Yeah, he didn't have a very long career. He
was out of the league by like 95.
94, I think. Yeah. Or not, you're right, 95. 94 was I think his last game was that. I think his last play was that pass in the Chargers game. Yep. Yeah. So, and that was, again, one of those instances where maybe the Steelers come back and win, maybe they don't. But that play definitely killed any chance of that. And the 49ers, again, Steelers, very mediocre, 49ers at the peak of their powers. So this would have been interesting, Steve, if they would have actually beaten them 3 times in that Joe Montana era. But it did not happen.
Not to be.
All right, we're going to zip forward to the year 2011 for our next Steelers 49ers memory. And that year, the 2 teams are scheduled to meet on a Monday night game at San Francisco in week 15. It's very late in the season, huge game, because both teams are 10-3 at the time. Some people were even saying this is a Super Bowl preview. Steelers and 49ers, both 10-3, both very good that year. The Steelers have a couple of problems, however. Problem number 1, James Harrison is suspended for this game because of a hit on Browns quarterback Colt McCoy the week before. Colt McCoy, by the way, projected opening day starter for your Arizona Cardinals this season. So kudos to that guy for playing into his 80s.
Wow. Yeah. It's kind of like file for Social Security along with his NFL pension or NFL paycheck.
So no James Harrison. The other big problem that happened in that Cleveland game the week before, Ben Roethlisberger had sprained his ankle. and he was in a walking boot all week. And at this point in the season, we said the Steelers are 10-3, but 2 of those 3 losses had come against the Ravens. So the only way that they can beat out Baltimore in the division is to have more wins than them, because Baltimore wins all the tiebreakers. And there's only 3 games left on the schedule, so that feels like it's unlikely. So the question all week is, who do you start in this game? Do you start a very hobbled Ben? Can he even play? Or do you start Charlie Batch? Well, we said this game was on a Monday. On Sunday, the Ravens lose to San Diego. So now, if the Steelers can win this game, then they can leapfrog in front of Baltimore. And there's only 2 weeks left in the season after this, right? They can win the division. So Mike Tomlin makes the decision. He's going to start Roethlisberger, even though Ben can barely walk. And I mean, that was the pregame reports. He was out there warming up and he could barely walk. But Tomlin feels like that's still their best option. The 49ers, this was the Jim Harbaugh era 49ers. They had a really good defense. So that just the thinking from Tomlin was Ben's our best option. It does not start well. Roethlisberger throws 2 early interceptions. And then in the second quarter, this happens.
All right, we're back live in San Francisco. Just seconds before we went to break, all of the power has gone out again here at Candlestick Park at 5:19 Pacific time, 11 minutes before we were supposed to come on the air and get started. We had a transformer blow, and we were delayed about 20 minutes or so in kicking the game off. And just as we were getting set to come back out of commercial, and the Steelers were getting ready to go at 6:43 Pacific time, here just under 3 minutes into the second quarter, the lights have gone out again here at Candlestick. The only lights that you're seeing, actually, other than the scoreboards, are lights from cameras and cell phones.
Nobody forgot to pay the power bill.
Do you remember that, Steve?
Yes, I do. I remember thinking the Steelers didn't have much a chance to beat this team before this week. I think if this is the game I'm thinking of. I just remember knowing they would lose this for whatever reason. Maybe just because all the times they've gone out and lost to the Raiders, like Tomlin does not do well on the West Coast, except for that one time against San Diego where he inexplicably beat them with Duck Hodges.
That's right.
So I don't know. I
mean, yeah, it was a weird game, and then the as you heard there, two separate power outages, just grinding this game to a halt. And what I remember thinking, Steve, is I remember thinking they should make San Francisco forfeit this game. Because, I mean, it was ridiculous. You know, if you're responsible for providing the facilities, if you can't get stuff to work and we can't play a real football game, then that's on you, right? Yeah. Like, it was just these delays and you had to wait forever for them to get the power back on. But again, like we said earlier, nothing stops the NFL train. They ultimately do get the lights back on. Unfortunately, when they do that, Ben and the Steelers offense are still in power outage mode. The 49ers do win that game 20-3. And that's a big deal because it basically relegates the Steelers to wild card status. And then 3 weeks later, they have to go to Denver to face Tim Tebow in the playoffs, and they have to sit Ryan Clark because it's in Denver, and we all know how that game ended. So losing this game in San Francisco kind of ruined whatever chances the Steelers had of doing something special that season. After this 2011 game, a lot of bad feelings. Ryan Clark insinuates that the power outages were intentional because there'd been a lot of drama in San Francisco about a new stadium. This was still Candlestick Park in 2011. And it was before they built that new stadium in Santa Clara. And there was a bunch of hubbub over that. So Ryan Clark thinks they did it on purpose to try to
look a new stadium.
Right. Look,
I always thought that too. Maybe that's why I got that from Ryan Clark. I mean, I don't think it affected the game at all, besides having to sit around for a couple minutes.
Well, it's one of those things you could argue affects both teams equally, right? Yeah. It's not like anybody got an advantage out of it.
I think the people that were advocating for a new stadium got an advantage out of it.
True. True.
It's like, oh, look, the old stadium can't even keep the lights on.
So Ryan Clark says that. Ben says that he feels like the Niners defenders were targeting his injured ankle. like they were diving in his ankle on purpose.
What a shocker. Like they weren't doing that. Like if they weren't doing that, were you playing football? I mean, come on.
So yeah, just a surprising amount of just kind of hard feelings after that game. And again, I think the Steelers probably realized at the time that losing that game would really hurt their chances of getting back to the Super Bowl. A lot of Monday morning quarterbacking on this one too, as to whether or not you should have played Ben Roethlisberger. For what it's worth, Tomlin does start Charlie Batch the following week against the Rams, and the Steelers win that game 27-0. But to be fair, the Rams were just a putrid 2-win team that year.
Was that when they're still in St. Louis?
Yeah, and I think they had who was Sam Bradford? Was that the guy they drafted that was a bust, right?
People from Oklahoma that won't be going to the NFL Hall.
Yeah. So I mean, that's not quite the same as if you would have started Charlie Batch in San Francisco. So I don't know. Was it the right move to start Ben or not? Did they win that game? Did they lose that game no matter what, Steve, to your point?
I remember thinking they're not going to win this game just because Tomlin's horrible on the West Coast and San Francisco was good. So that was kind of my thought process on that one. I just like sometimes you just get an intuition about certain games. You're like, okay, there's no way the Steelers win this. Sometimes you're wrong, but I don't know. I've noticed mine, especially with like more Pitt football and Cleveland. Maybe just have I could probably go through their schedule and with 90% accuracy tell you which ones are going to win and lose.
Yeah, you kind of get that. You kind of get that after watching a team for enough years.
I guess too, it's like you have a 50-50 chance. It's like flip a coin. You could pick it that way too. Would it be any better? I don't know.
Not having James Harrison hurt too. That was a big controversy. We actually covered that in our Forgotten Controversies episode. Him getting suspended for that hit on Colt McCoy, because the controversy there was that McCoy was running on that play. He scrambled, so he turned himself into a running back. So the hit that Harrison put on him really, if that would have been,
where they made him start after he had a concussion. Like,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Cleveland. Yeah, that's right. James Harrison completely knocked him out. He in Cleveland, and all their Cleveland wisdom, put him back into the game. And he said later that he didn't remember half of the fourth quarter or whatever, but that was another controversy about that game, in the NFL publishing a picture of him being dazed or something. They had it on their website to sell or something. Remember that? Yeah. So yeah, there was a whole thing around that. So yeah, who knows if they win anyway? Honestly, I think the thing that I'll kind of always remember from this is that I think that season was really lost the week before in that game against Cleveland, not when Harrison got suspended, but when Ben got hurt. And he got hurt trying to extend a play like he always did back then. He was in the pocket. He was being pressured. He didn't try to throw it away. He didn't take a sack. He tried to scramble around, and then he got hit. And that's when he hurt his ankle. And Ben had so much success playing like that. He had been to 3 Super Bowls, obviously, but it's also what got him injured a lot. And, I've said it before on the show, that 2011 season is when I think the Rooneys just decided enough is enough. We can't do this anymore. And then they fired Bruce Arians after that year. Bruce Arians was a very successful offensive coordinator, obviously went on to become a very successful coach other places, but they just couldn't play that style of offense anymore. And I mean, again, looking back, Ben played another decade after he stopped playing with that style. So I don't know. I think that was the kind of the seminal moment of the season, him getting hurt because he was scrambling, and then him getting hurt made it almost guaranteed they were going to lose that game to the 49ers. And because of that, they were wild card and they lost that game because they had to play in a city where their starting safety had to sit. So
definitely like a weird, like, butterfly effect there going on.
For sure. All right. We're going to go to the 2015 season. The Steelers once again opened their home schedule that year against the 49ers. Here's a fun fact. In the last 40 years, the 49ers have made 6 trips to Pittsburgh. 4 of those 6 games, including this upcoming game in 2023, served as the Steelers' home opener. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know if that's coincidence or what, but yeah.
I mean, probably. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to like without like a something to give perspective. I mean, it's not like a divisional opponent where you're going to play them a lot.
Right. Just interesting that you have 8 home games a year, and of those 6 times they came here, 4 of those 6 were the home opener. So
they don't get the home opener a lot either. Like well, I guess they have a home opener every year, but early in the season they don't have a home opener.
Yeah. I mean the first home game. Not sometimes it was the first game, like that 87 game was the first game. Yeah. And then one of those Steve Young years it was the first game. But I think in 2015, I think it might have been week 2 at that point, but it was the home
because
opener.
Of what we stated before, because the Pirates always play on Labor Day.
Yes. Pirates always ruin everything. I think that's the moral of the story. Okay. This game is worth mentioning because it comes at a time when the Steelers offense is at the height of its powers. Ben Roethlisberger torches the 49ers defense for 369 yards. 195 of those yards are to Antonio Brown. And that's all despite the fact that the Steelers only had the ball for 23 minutes during that game. DeAngelo Williams has 3 touchdowns. And it's going to be a long day for your defense when you get burnt by this guy.
Play clock at 3. Off play action. Roethlisberger to the end zone. Here's Hayward Bay makes the catch for Steelers touchdown. Wow.
I remember that game. When you first said I didn't remember. But then when you showed that highlight, that was the game. I remember Ben was absolutely on fire. Like his passes, like even that pass, like it wasn't like he was wide open. He was just pinpoint accurate. And I think did Kaepernick play in this game? They had or was that a later?
Nope. Yeah, it was Kaepernick.
And he was horrible. He like overthrew everybody. I remember thinking, why do people think this guy's even good? Like, and then like, oh, he should be in the NFL. I watched him play. He was not that good. I don't even know how they made the Super Bowl with him that one year. He has a really strong arm, but he's not accurate. He is like the classic Cordell Stewart problem. Like like one of those quarterbacks has a really strong arm, but it's not accurate. And that just, if you're not accurate in the NFL, you're not going to be a quarterback for very long.
Yeah, I think Cordell Stewart's a great comp because guys like that can have short-term success because they're playmakers.
Yeah.
They can make plays. Like Cordell would make plays, and that's how you'd win games. But then if you got into like something very clutch, like say an AFC championship game, then he wouldn't, or the defense or good defense would just figure it out. And you're right. Kaepernick had that success early in his career. And by 2015, he's not good anymore. And this is before all the national anthem stuff. And what I remember about that game, Steve, is that the people sitting in front of me, I was at this game at Heinz Field. The people in front of me were 49ers fans with their 49ers gear on. And they were screaming at him the whole game. And instead of calling him Kaepernick, they were replacing the N in his last name with a D.
Oh, okay. Well, that went better than I thought it did. I mean,
so that's what I remember. Their fans didn't like him, thought he should be benched. And again, there's always narratives that form in sports, just like there are narratives that form everywhere else.
They had
and like
the
you said,
jabroni coach too. Like their coach was a joke too.
Yeah, I think that was that Jim Tom Sola guy.
Yeah, he was there 1 year.
Yeah. I could be wrong, but I remember
that. Sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, and the narrative around Kaepernick is he was a Super Bowl quarterback, and then he protested, and then he was banned from the league. But people don't remember that he was not very good for a couple of years. Actually, lost his job to, I want to say, Blaine Gabbert, who also wasn't very good, right? So that was kind of really, if you want like the real story, that's really what happened. And then when it came time for, would somebody want to sign him or not? I mean, Yes, you could have a mediocre backup or third string quarterback, but there's lots of those guys, right?
And they
And
don't have all the
the
That's
baggage.
he has the same problem, and I've said this before. Him and Tim Tebow have the same problem,
Right.
and quite honestly, Tim Tebow is has half the arm that this guy has, but he's not as accurate and can't read a defense.
Yeah. Would you want your second or third string quarterback to be the subject of every interview, all this media hubbub? I don't see why you'd want that. And what the cost benefit analysis is, you're not winning out there. And like you said with the 49ers, interesting, like we talked about, like Montana Young, and then they stink, and then Harbaugh. They had this dip in the mid 2010s where after Harbaugh was gone, they went through a bunch of really bad seasons again. And then Shanahan comes in, and they've been to what I want to say 3 of the last 4 NFC Championship games, if I'm counting correctly.
Yeah, and then they got a Super Bowl too, didn't
they? And a Super Bowl that they almost won against Kansas City. So, I
almost won with their third string quarterback, who I think the book's still out on Brock Purdy.
For sure.
And I think now, how you say, I think the Steelers win that game. Hot take. Just because it's the home opener, and the Steelers always do better at home. And Brock Purdy's coming off Tommy John surgery. Now I could be totally wrong, but normally doesn't it take people like a year to get completely better from that?
I will say it's great timing. Like the Steelers,
he might be good later in the season, but you're getting him first game out of the gate. They have a good chance to beat them.
There's going to be rust. It's great timing, because that was a game that you were going to have on your schedule no matter what. And that game is going to be way easier in week 1 than it is in week 15 or week even 8.
Yeah.
So that was very fortunate for the Steelers.
Yeah, because it's going to be one of those, they beat San Francisco, won the Super Bowl. Like, I could see San Francisco going on winning the Super Bowl next year.
Yeah,
I could.
Yep.
But I think early in the season, they're going to struggle until his injury heals up a little more, and, we see if he's for real or not.
Week 1's always a little bit of a crapshoot anyway.
Yeah, you never know who's going to be good and who's going to be bad either.
Right. And you always have like upsets, like the Steelers beating Cincinnati in Cincinnati last season. That was a little bit of a
if
blip.
They end that game in regular, like if that game doesn't go to overtime, I am totally convinced, and like TJ Watt doesn't get hurt, if they scored like just one more touchdown, they probably win like 2 more games that season and make the playoffs, because TJ Watt doesn't get hurt. They don't have to play like literally a death match against Cincinnati for overtime. And that just killed their season, having that first game right out of the gate go to overtime, and that was just because the offense stunk.
Right.
It's just, when your offense stinks, even when you have a really good defense, the defense just gets beat up, and over an 18-game season now, you just can't hold up. You just can't hold up.
And honestly, to your point, that's why I put this, going back to this 2015 game. It wasn't much of a game. The Steelers win 43-18, but I put it on here just kind of a reminder of how elite the Steelers offense was in the mid 2010s, and how really unfortunate it was that they were never able to make it to a Super Bowl. Because when you had Roethlisberger and Lev Bell and Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant, and it was, even like D'Angelo Williams, like we said, had 3 touchdowns in this game. It was just such a good offense, and it just never came together. Lots of reasons for that we've talked about before. Definitely some team cancers and things like that. Some unfortunate events like Ryan Shazier getting hurt. But man, it just reminds you of how good that offense was, right?
How like teams went 15-1, like it boggles your mind. Like, how does a team, like, even there was a year, what year was it? Was it the COVID year when the Steelers were undefeated? Was that
right?
Yeah, even that year. But then everybody got hurt because they kept having to play like 3 games in a week. That ended that season. If they don't have to, if the Rooney stand up a little bit more to the league and say, no, you can move Baltimore's schedule. Like Baltimore that never happened to Baltimore, not once. And I would be really ticked, because that totally ruined. They had a legitimate gripe that year that ruined their season. Because wasn't there a year? Yeah, there was that over Thanksgiving where they had to play an extra game in the middle of a week. They literally played like 3 games in 2 weeks. It's like Detroit doesn't even do that, and they have to play on Thanksgiving every year. It's ridiculous.
Yep. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what will be interesting to look back on those 2010s It's hard decade to really 70s, 80s, 90s, the 10s.
The 10s.
But looking back on those teams, I mean, I don't know if the Steelers will ever have that good of an offense ever again. But it never really, they never won anything. Like our last episode, we were talking about Dan Marino, and his great NFL career, but he never won anything. It just, that offense was kind of in that same
kind
category.
Of feel. Yeah. And I'm sad you didn't cover the Steve Young game where he carved us up.
Yeah, that wasn't the greatest memory. Steve Young, for the record, Steve Young actually beat the Steelers twice, 93 and 96. Both of those Steelers teams were good. Both of those teams were playoff teams, but they could not stop Steve Young or Jerry Rice or Terrell Owens. Both of those games were at the River Stadium too. But yeah, Steve Young was pretty good too.
Yeah. Well, especially with Jerry Rice and Terrell Owens.
Yes. All right, folks, that's it for our episode. Hope you enjoyed that memory lane jaunt of Steelers 49ers memories. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We so appreciate your support of this show. Please check us out on social media, on Facebook or Twitter. Please tell your friends about the show. That's really we think the best way that people can find out about the show is through word of mouth. And we will catch you next time.